Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing some spring cleaning on some of my guns. So I'm going to be cleaning my Glock 43 here among some others. So I figured what I would do is go ahead and bring you guys along as I do a complete full disassembly of this, and then I'll clean it, and then I'll do a full complete reassembly of this handgun on camera just for anyone who is curious on how these things take apart or go back together. Now, if you are more familiar with the full-size Glocks, whether it be the 9, 40, 45, they all take down pretty much identical. The Glock 42 and Glock 43 are a little bit different just because of the way they're made. Really, the main differences you're going to see are going to be around the trigger housing, but I'll show you that more in depth when I get to those. So I'm going to just go ahead and start taking this thing apart, walk you through the whole process, hopefully give you guys some good views and you can see what I'm doing. Just so you know, the only tool I'm really going to be using is my Leatherman Juice S2, and I'm going to be using the little tiny screwdriver it's got on there because this works very well as a punch, and for whatever reason I can't find my Glock tool right now, so this will be standing in the meantime. Really great multi-tool. They don't look like this anymore. They have a new model out, but same tools and everything. So I highly recommend these. I'll put a link to my review of it up there in the corner. But first, what I'm going to do, obviously, before you take any firearm apart, you should obviously make sure it's clear. So obviously that's what I'm going to do now. So make sure there's nothing in the chamber. You have to pull the trigger on Glock. Some people don't like that. Me, it doesn't make any difference. But you have to actually depress the trigger, and then on both sides you see this little takedown bar. You have to pull down on both sides at the same time and pull the slide just barely to the rear, maybe that far. You'll feel the takedown bars go down, and you just let it forward, and then the slide will come right off. So very, very simple, very straightforward to get it off. Now we have it in the two main pieces, which is the slide and the frame. The slide is very easy to disassemble. Right here you have your recoil spring. In the Glock 43, it is a dual recoil spring, so you have one spring riding inside of another one. So put that off to the side. This is as far as you need to take this thing down. Then you can slide out the barrel. What I like to do is, while holding it upside down like this, I will push up on the top of the chamber here, and that will just push that barrel up, and we'll just slide it out. And that's as far as this takes down. No other pieces for the barrel. At this point, it gets a little bit more complicated, and there are some more differences here compared to the other Glocks when it comes to the little plunger safety there as well. But same general idea. If you look in, let me see, try to get it at the right angle. There's a little black sleeve right there at the base of that opening. This right here is the striker. That little piece sticking out is what actually hooks onto the trigger. You have to depress that while pushing this back plate down. Depressing that will take all the tension off there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down, and while I'm pushing down, I'm just going to be pushing towards my right with the back plate and slowly slide it off. I want to be very gentle because there's a bunch of stuff under spring tension under there, and I don't want it to come flying out. So again, I'm going to depress that little black sleeve under there while pushing forward on that. And all right, once you hear it kind of pop, that's going to be the sound of your extractor spring. At that point, you don't need to depress the sleeve down anymore, and then you can just slide off that back plate. Again, I like to keep my thumb over it just so nothing comes flying out, and there's your back plate. At this point, what I'm going to do is just push up on the striker catch right there, and that's going to take that whole assembly out, and then you'll see the spring portion there for the for the extractor spring. Now, one thing to note, there's a solid portion, and then there's the spring portion. The spring portion is always going to go towards the aft of the slide, but I'll discuss that more in depth when I put this thing back together. Alright, so at this point, the only things we have left are the extractor and that little safety plunger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push up on that safety plunger, which should relieve the tension enough for the extractor to come falling out. So I'll even do it with this just so you can kind of see. But I'm going to push down, and yeah, it didn't take much pressure at all. And this is your extractor that's going to come out. At that point, I can just pull down or maybe pry out that little safety plunger. It's harder to do behind a camera. And then that comes out just like that. And you have a little spring inside there. It's going to be the smallest spring on the slide, so make sure you don't lose it. Now the only thing we have left to disassemble is the actual striker assembly here. Now I have multiple times almost lost the little cups that keep this spring in place, so you have to be very, very careful here. What I'm going to do, just to make it a little simpler, I'm going to put my barrel slide down and basically use this as a nice platform to actually push down on the spring. So with that striker section off to the side so it doesn't go down, I'm just going to push down on that spring, pull the suction cups off, well, not suction cups, but the little cups off, and then very gently release that spring, otherwise this thing will go flying. At that point you can pull that sleeve off the striker, and now we have our slide fully disassembled. So these are the cups that I was talking about. Basically there are two halves that go together to actually lock that spring in place. And they can sometimes be a real pain. So that's our slide fully disassembled. So now we'll move on to our frame. There are two pins on the Glock 43 that actually hold everything in place. We have normally on like Gen 3 or 4 Glocks, on the full-size Glocks, you'll have two pins up here with one pin in the rear. This one only has one. I have found that a lot of people take a punch and hammer this one until it comes out. That's really not necessary, at least in my experience. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of fiddle around with the slide lock right here and even push down on it because there's spring tension on the front of the extractor springs, and then I'll just push this straight through. So I'll just kind of fiddle around, and yeah, all you got to do is push down towards the forward part of it, and it relieves all the tension on it, and you can pull that pin all the way out. At that point you can, well, hold on to that for a second. So now I'm going to take out the pin that holds on the trigger assembly or trigger housing. Just going to push through. See if I can just pull this out by hand. And that's our two pins. At this point I'm going to pull out the locking block right here. I'm just going to get up underneath it and pull up. At that point our slide lock will come out. That's the spring I was talking about, so that's why I like to push down on the front part. And then at this point our entire trigger assembly will just pull straight up and out of the Glock frame. We'll disassemble that more in a second. At this point, this is really as far as you normally have to take it down, but if you want to do things like take out your magazine release, then what I'll do is I'm going to use this little pick here. This is a Husky pick. They usually come in a set of four. I'm just going to use this angled one right here. Now you should be able to see down in there a little bar that I'm pointing to right there. Hopefully you guys can see that well enough. That bar is basically acting as a tensioner on the magazine release. So if I push on the magazine release, you'll see that move off to the side, hopefully. Hopefully you guys can see that well enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull on that bar off to the right side of the frame, and there is a little channel that will allow it to pop out. It'll come out straight, and then you can pull your magazine release out. Sometimes you have to kind of angle it around, pivot around, like if you're moving a couch upstairs, and that will allow you to actually fully remove that magazine release. Now if you want, you can also pull that out. Just take some pliers and pull it straight up, and that will come out as well. But really this is as far as you need to take it down. If you have to take it down any further than this, really the only thing is to take that bar out and to take your takedown bar out, but really you shouldn't have to do that. Now to fully disassemble our trigger housing, trigger assembly, this is again where we have some differences between this and the other Glocks out there. Same general parts, but it's configured a little bit differently. So instead of having a trigger spring that goes from the rear of the housing to the back of this little crucifix form, we just have a little bar in there. So what we have to do, you can see it caught around the front part there. Let me use this to point right in there. That's what's keeping that in place. So kind of similar to the other ones, you just want to kind of pull it up and pivot it out, kind of pivot the rear end outboard, and it'll come out for you. At that point, your trigger is fully disassembled. Then we have our connector here. One thing to note on connectors, they're supposed to stick out like that. So if that looks odd to you, it's fine. It's supposed to do that. Don't try to straighten it. But you can get up underneath it like this, or there's also an access point from the other way. If you have a Glock tool, you can just push through on that. But for ease right now, it's going to get underneath this, pry this up, and then pull that out by hand. Set that down. And then this can be the most complicated part of disassembly on here, is taking this little bar out. If you get like a spring upgrade kit, you'll have to replace that spring in there, and it can kind of be a pain. If you look closely, you'll see that there is a little kind of bar that holds it horizontal, and then the opening is vertical. What you have to do is pivot this around to where that hole lines up with this bar, and that will allow you to take this whole piece out, and then your spring will come straight out as well. So that's kind of what I'm gonna try to do. Hopefully you guys will be able to see it well enough. So I'm just gonna try to get up underneath this bar and pivot it off to the side. Oh, went back. So pivot it up and off. It's gonna be difficult. Okay, pivot it up and off to the side like that. All right, so once it's lined up in there, we'll be able to slide this piece out, and then this spring will come out like that, and then that bar is not being held in it anymore, so that can come out as well, but I'm not gonna, well, just for grins and giggles, I'll take it out then, I guess. Yeah, I got caught up in there. I don't even know how I did that. This was one of the more frustrating things when I first got my Glock 43. Someone was making a video on how to disassemble it, which I was watching to be able to upgrade the spring on my boss's Glock. And he got to the trigger housing, saw that it was different, and said, oh, well, I guess I won't do that this video. And I was like, well, that's the only part I wanted to see, so that's why I'm doing that for you guys. So at this point, our Glock is fully disassembled. You can totally do a detailed cleaning on it, which I'm about to do. And then once I'm done cleaning it, I'll turn the camera back on and show you how to put this together. Right now, it probably looks like it's in some pretty good disarray, but we'll get this thing back together, no problem. So I'll put a link to that here at the end, and as always, I hope you're able to get something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. Forward, so the spring part, you should see the black tip here at the very back. I'm going to slide our our striker assembly back into the slide. Now at this point, you're going to have to push down on the striker. Sometimes if